the fortunate position of being able to talk to a large number of IT people across many industries. Unfortunately, what they have to say is not good. Too many IT projects are failing. Research shows that around 25% of all projects fail, 25% succeed, and the rest are somewhere in between. This translates to a loss of $1.5 billion in New Zealand each year, and this doesn't even include the opportunity cost if we did it well. The Getting I.T Right initiative is about improving New Zealand IT, realising the potential that's sitting in our great country and using our smart people to deliver great products and services to the rest of the world. Since the initiative's launch, we have made significant progress in Getting I.T Right in New Zealand, including working together with new professional bodies such as New Zealand Computer Society, PMI, NZICE, etc. to promote these best practices. We've partnered with IDC to launch the Getting I.T Right survey, our first ever nationwide survey to measure IT improvement on an annual basis. We've started running the Getting IT Right seminar series to cover topics that will help improve IT projects and maximise business benefits.
Hi everyone, welcome. First of all, welcome to Getting IT Right seminar number 2. Getting IT Right, of course, about improving IT in New Zealand, so I hope that's what you're here for. If you want to make it worse, that's the next seminar just next door. Order of events, of course, a few drinks in the networking started, now the event. Afterwards, again, a few more drinks and a bit more networking. If you want the facilities, they are down past the elevators or the lifts. It's a little bit tricky to find it on the left, so I'll just put it that way. So I think that's pretty much it. Right, back to the Getting IT Right. We've had one already, which was about the nationwide survey. Tonight's one, we're really starting to get into the guts of Getting IT Right. Getting IT Right's broken into a chunk of chapters that we've uncovered over the last few years. And this particular topic is organisational maturity. And Owen is going to speak on this, being our president expert. He's an experienced management consultant and CIO who is passionate about using technology to deliver real business value. Owen has over 20 years of experience in the IT industry and has vast experience in all elements of system lifecycle, from the development and implementation of IT strategy through to IT operations. He has worked in technology throughout his career as a consultant for Deloitte Consulting, and as a lead partner in Deloitte's outsourcing practice in Australasia, and of course as a CIO of the warehouses. He now owns and operates Viewfield Consulting, which focuses on supporting CIOs and senior technology executives to be successful in delivering value from technology investments in their organisation. So, hopefully that sort of sets some context for this.
Thank you very much, Scott. I think that's the first time I've been introduced as an expert. Which scares me a little bit, because many years ago someone told me that the definition of an expert, and I'm sure you've probably all heard it, X is the unknown quantity and a spurt is a drip under pressure. So hopefully I can do a little bit better than being that type of expert tonight. So thank you very much. It's good to be here. I'll try not to talk so loud. I'm used to talking loud. It's good to be here, and as you can see, the topic today is about creating world-class IS organisations. And it's a topic I'm really passionate about and talk about a lot, because as I've progressed through my career, I've come to the realisation that real value delivery, where the rubber hits the road, is through world-class IS teams. That most of the rest of the people, us consultants, for example, software vendors, whoever it happens to be, ultimately can't deliver value until it goes through, a corporate or a large organisation IT team who interfaces with the user, who delivers real technology that users can use to deliver real value. And ultimately that's where the rubber hits the road. And so what we need to be able to do then is figure out, I believe, is how to create those world-class teams, and through that how to deliver value. And the secret is organisational maturity, and those of you who've heard me talk before, I represent that in terms of being a hierarchy of needs, but we'll get to that later on in terms of how we drive it and make that happen. So how do you deliver value from technology, or does technology actually deliver value? And actually, the research on this is kind of disappointing, because what most of the research says is there is no direct correlation between the amount of money that an organisation spends on IT and the value that it creates from it. No correlation at all. In fact, what this graph shows, and this is from an Accenture study done quite a few years ago, is that the highest performing companies actually spend the least money on IT as a proportion of their business than anyone else in the industry. So you could actually argue there's an inverse relationship between the amount of money spent on IT and the value that's created through IT. And that's kind of disturbing. When you believe as I do, that IT has the ability to create value, and that's really what it is you want to stand for. To be able to see a slide like this put up and told, that's all a crock of rubbish, actually what you believe fundamentally doesn't exist, that causes you to do some soul-searching. There are some good messages in there though, because the message behind that, if you start to dig a little bit deeper, is that leading organisations, the way their IT departments operate and the way they spend their money is fundamentally different than the rest of the market. Specifically, they spend a whole bunch less money on operations and a whole bunch more money on discretionary work and projects. So if you look at that graph, right, and you look at that graph and you go, the leaders in the organisation spend 15 to 20% less than the overall industry average in terms of IT, but actually they free up more money as a proportion of what they spend to invest in projects than the rest of the industry. What does that tell you? Well, if you think about it for a wee while, you get the startling realisation that high-performing organisations have high-performing IT departments. Geez, go figure. So, but they spend their money quite differently. And actually, if you analyse the numbers, really what we're saying is that they're more or less, you're getting close to twice as efficient as the average IT organisation, or those ones which are high-performing organisations. And so the question really isn't, does IT create value? The answer is actually it does if you have the right type of IT organisation. It's how do you create that high-performing IT organisation that is going to add value to the organisation going forward. And that's our challenge, right? Creating the high-performing IT organisation. And our companies expect it, right? And the quote at the top, which is sourced from PwC, our companies expect us to create high-performing organisations, and they expect us to be delivering a lot more value and be integrated a lot more into the businesses that we represent than what we currently are. And because what you have to do is drive a high-performing organisation, because I love stories, I reckon the challenge is about how do we get a fat man to run a marathon, or how do we get the flabby, underperforming IT organisations to be world-class at what they do and be able to run world-class marathons. Now, I'm really well qualified to talk to one part of that, which is how to be a fat man. I have less qualifications on how to be a world-class marathon runner, but over my time I've done a little bit of training, and I've run a 10K in Atlanta, which was a pretty amazing event, and I've done a half marathon. So, and what I learned from that exercise, and as I was thinking about this challenge, there's a lot of parallels in that, is that the way in which you train to run a 10K from being a fat man or to run a half marathon, and ultimately if you wanted to progress towards world class, which is a long journey, there are some basic things you need to do. So here's what I did, right? And my wife said, you know what, I'm going to run the Peachtree Road Race, which is a 10K road race in Atlanta, quite famous. Currently they have about 90,000 participants in the Peachtree Road Race. If you don't register until the first week, you don't get to run. Pretty phenomenal event. She said, because we were living in Atlanta at the time, I want to go do that event. So I said, I'll do it this week. So being a bloke and having just decided to sign up to run a 10K, what do you reckon I did? It's true, I did do that, but after I sobered up, I then went out and tried to run 10K. About a week later, when I could walk properly, I figured that perhaps that wasn't the best way to run a 10K and ultimately a half marathon. And it was about that time that I decided maybe I should get someone to help me do this, something about it. And the apartment complex we're in, had a personal trainer, so we saw the personal trainer, this is what we want to do. And her advice to me essentially was, although to be fair, she is much more polite than this, but basically what she said was, you fat slot, put down the TV remote control, put your running shoes on and go for a walk. And that's what she had me do for the first few weeks. And then she said, now start running from power pole to power pole. Then start running, a couple of power poles at a time, and slowly over time, jog more, walk less, until you can start to jog for half an hour, and then build that up over time until you get to be doing 10k, and then you're jogging for 10k, and then you can start worrying about times that you might want to be running. And you progress through that step by step by step by step over time. And that, if you wanted ultimately to become a world-class marathon runner, you're clearly starting a lot younger than what I am at the moment. You need to have a physio, you need to do nutrition, blah, 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 blah. But here's the thing that's also part of that story, which we'll get into, is that actually most of us, if you sit down and think about it for half an hour, and you go, well, actually, how do I get from being a fat man to running a 10k or a half marathon or a marathon? You can think for half an hour and actually you figure it out. Because it's not that tough, right? It's about doing exercise and running consistently. It's about nutrition. If you're old like I am, it's probably about a very good physio. It's about stretching and making sure that your body's agile and you don't tear it up, etc. But actually, we could all figure that out. Because actually, the process is quite simple. The problem is that we don't execute it on a consistent basis. And I think the journey to a world-class IS organisation is very, very similar, and the analogy fits. Actually, the things you have to do to create a world-class IS organisation, I reckon if you all sat down and seriously thought about it for half an hour, you'd come up with most of the right answer. And you don't actually need me to stand there and tell you. The problem is, this is an organisation that we don't execute it consistently all the time. We don't execute it consistently all the time. And that's our challenge, is figuring out how to make sure we get that consistent execution all the time and how to fill it up. Now, what I'm actually going to do for the rest of the presentation is I'm going to tell you what the running and the nutrition equivalents I think of creating a world-class IS organisation are. And I'm going to reference a lot about the journey that we did at the warehouse, because that's core to my experience. The first thing the warehouse taught me about was this issue about best practices, because I spent 18 years at Deloitte Consulting. And if there's one thing I learned at Deloitte Consulting, it was how to talk a really good story about best practice. Now, I had best practice out the wazoo, and I could talk best practice, no problem at all. But what I found when I landed at the warehouse is best practice was completely useless and impractical. Why? Because best practice is like going out and running a 10k when you're a fat man. That's what best practice is. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I started to coin the phrase, ignore best practice. I mean, ultimately you do need to know that if that's what your goal is, right? But ignore best practice, focus on next practice, which is put the remote control out, go out for a walk, now start jogging a little bit. And that it's about figuring out what next practice is and about implementing next practice and driving it and taking that forward. So my journey at the warehouse, kind of where it started was landing there with all the hopes and joys of a consultant who understood best practice and wanted to figure out how to drive and move value, and actually fundamentally didn't believe in corporate's ability to do that, because as a consultant I was reasonably disappointed in my clients running my decently perfectly good projects. And part of my motivation for crossing over was to find out why, in fact, CIOs were so stupid and made those dumbass decisions that meant best practice couldn't be and then followed. I did eventually find out that CIOs aren't quite as stupid as I thought they were because of the next practice, back practice issue. But I got at the warehouse and they were in some disarray. And there's lots of ways in which I could characterise the disarray that the organisation was in, but I'll just pick one. And that was, at the time that I arrived at the warehouse, we had 2 IS departments. The reason we had 2 was because one half hated the other half so much that they left and set themselves up within a business unit. There are lots of other things I can tell you about that. I will tell you one more favourite one. We had 62 P1 incidents in the first 60 days I was on the job. This is one that a lot of you would have, if you've heard me talk, would have heard me quote. P1 incident, we classify a P1 incident at the warehouse as being something that stops us trading at the till, something that stops us buying stock or moving stock through the supply chain. Right, that's what a P1 is. It's pretty simple. There's not that many things to do it. We had 62 of these puppies in the first 60 days. What scared me the most was no one called to complain. Because that was situation normal, situation usual. And, I went in there because I was the consultant, I knew what I was doing, I had all the answers, and I started talking best practice to my organisation, and they had no idea what I was talking about. There was no communication going on, right? I just went straight over the top, because that wasn't their will, it was a bridge too far. It was about trying to have an in-depth conversation with me about the finer arts of training for a world-class marathon. I just wasn't in a position to be able to hear it, and they were intended. So I began to figure out then that the best practice wasn't going to work. So I had to start trying to figure out, well, what was going to work? What was going to work and what was going to help us go on the journey. And as I got to that point, I did what I typically do when I face problems which I don't understand, and that's read. And I read and I read and I read and I researched and I researched and I researched, and this is what I found. I found lots of IT literature that said you need to be best practice. And this is what best practice is. That's actually very useful to me. I was a consultant, I know best practice. And I'm beginning to figure out it doesn't work. I also found a whole bunch of literature that said if you're a CIO and your organisation is not best class, you're going to have your ass fired really quickly. Because companies aren't going to put up with it. Right? That PwC quote. They're expecting you to be best practice and they're expecting you to be able to partner. That didn't thrill me particularly.
Isn't best practice the difference between what you can't do and what a consultant would like you to do and extract money for you to do?
Now that I'm a consultant, yes. Yes, particularly the money extraction part.
Exactly.
Particularly the money extraction part. So, what I didn't find in the literature was, if you're currently running an IT organisation that isn't best practice, here's the duty you need to undertake. There was nothing there to help me. There is a little bit starting to trickle through now, but not much. There is a little bit starting to trickle through, but not much. So we embarked on a journey of making that up. And so how do you embark on a journey of making it up when you don't know? And as I said, if I read it, and there are a number of key influences that help me. Here are two really big ones for me on this side. Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You're all familiar with Stephen Covey? The key thing for me in Stephen Covey's Highly Effective People as it relates to this journey is private victory versus public victory. What Covey talks about is private victory versus public victory, and your private victory must precede your public victory. What that meant to me was that as a CIO who wanted to have influence, because I did want to have influence, because that's ultimately how you add value, is by being influential around strategy and being able to position how technology can help. I needed to create the private victory for the IT team before I could have the public victory of influence across the organisation. And I didn't have that private victory, right, because I couldn't stand in the boardroom and say, oh, I'm competent. And we couldn't do that because we weren't. And I've always been a fan of Covey's, and as I was thinking through the issues, and by the way, I'm presenting these in a reasonably logical sequential process. I can please be assured this was not a reasonably sequential rational process. There was a lot of soul searching and circle grinding in this. The second one is Abraham Maslow. You see Abraham Maslow there. Abraham Maslow, that well-known technologist. So for those of you who don't know Maslow, he was an American psychologist, right? Most famous for developing the hierarchy of needs, which is what you saw there. And what Maslow did through the hierarchy of needs, and what he said through the hierarchy of needs, which was a major break with pretty much all psychologists before him, is he said people are complex and have very, very many needs. Most psychologists before him basically said, and this is kind of a Freudian view, right? Basically said people have two needs, physical needs of the body and the need for sex. By the way, if that doesn't go well for you, blame your mother. That's pretty much what they said. Maslow said, actually, it's not that simple. It's not that simple. There are many, many needs that people have, and people are motivated by many, many things. And he created the hierarchy of needs of human motivation to describe that. And the feature of the hierarchy of needs of motivation that really stood out to me over time as I looked at it and studied it and became quite enamored with it was his idea that says needs are more important than others, and you become absolutely compulsive, basically, about the most basic, outstanding need that you have. And you become fixated with trying to figure out how to meet that need until such time as it's satisfied, then it fails to motivate and you move to the next level of the hierarchy and start to look at the next level of needs. And he set that out in his hierarchy of needs in terms of being physiological needs first, which is the needs of the body, hunger, thirst, sex. Then it's about safety needs. Am I secure? Have I got protection? Then it's about social needs around the need to commit, the need to be part of a group, the need to be loved, the need to be accepted as part of the group and the social being. Then it's about ego needs and really being seen to be worthy for yourself. He described those as being deficiency. It's kind of things that needed to be solved and filled up. Before then you could express yourself effectively in the world through self-actualization. and be effectively expressing yourself in the meetings. But I became quite enamoured by that, and the whole idea of becoming compelled by the most basic outstanding need before you move on. And this really appealed to me, and one of the reasons it really appealed to me is that I had an experience of walking into my chief executive's office, walking into Ed's office and going, a little bit nervously, I'm here to talk to you today about IT strategy, because we need to put an IT strategy together and we need to figure out how to take the organisation forward and work business and IT together. I walked into his office and he looked at me and he says, Owen, why didn't I get my sales reports today? Well, I didn't know he didn't have his sales reports. But those of you who know anything about retail will know that retailers are completely and utterly obsessed with their daily sales reports. And the first thing you do, and you know, I was new to retail when I joined the warehouse, but it didn't take long to figure out that the first thing you did was look at daily sales, so you could talk about daily sales with whoever you happened to meet in the corridor. and he didn't have his daily sales report. And I can tell you, I did not spend a moment talking about strategy that day. I spent my whole time defending why, in fact, I wasn't completely incompetent, and why my team wasn't completely incompetent, and why he shouldn't fire me. And you know, as I read about Maslow, it's like, I think I've developed part of my hierarchy. Sales needs is more basic fundamental needs than strategy. So I started to try and think about these two things: private victory, public victory, basic needs, unbasic needs, and how do you drive that? And I'm starting to come to the conclusion that, you know, well, what is world class anyway? Well, ultimately what world class is, particularly in a Maslow hierarchy of needs terms, what world class ultimately is an IS organisation that meets all of the needs of the organisation has, right? Because if you can meet all the needs, then you can call yourself world class. Yes, it's non-comparative because the needs of a warehouse are different than the needs of an Auckland council, which are different than the needs of Linden Field, which are different, you know, etc., etc. But there are some generic similarities to that, but the specific needs are a little bit different. But if you can actually say, I meet all the needs of my organisation, and I'll talk a little bit later about how you assess that, but just to give you a clue, your customer will tell you if you meet all their needs or not. Then I think you can say you're world class. The problem with that is you need to figure out what the needs are. So I developed an IS hierarchy of needs to guide our organisation around where we were going and what we were doing. And this is my view of what it takes to create a world-class IS organisation. It is meet the hierarchy of needs as it's set out here, one by one, starting with the most basic first. The most basic need that we have in an IS organisation that you need to fulfil is give the bosses sales reports. Make sure your systems are reliable and they work when your users expect them to work. Right? That's the very basic. It has to be reliable. Actually, don't worry too much at that stage as to how efficient or effective they are, but please make sure the systems work when they are meant to work and they deliver the service they say they need to be delivering. Oh, by the way, that applies to projects. Make sure you deliver the projects that you say you deliver on time and on budget to schedule. That's reliability. The next need is to be cost effective. Now you can cut it any way you want, but the language of business ultimately is money. The language of any large organisation ultimately is money. Now I'm a big believer in a purpose-driven organisation, but there ain't no purpose without cash. And so you need to be able to talk money, and you need to be able to talk economics, and you need to be able to display and demonstrate that to your organisation, both in terms of how you run your organisation, but also about how you engage. So you need to be easy to do business with, you need to be efficient and effective at what you do, you need to be a good steward of the resources that you are assigned to operate with, and show that you can make that happen. Now, I reckon, having thought about this for months and months and months and talking to different ideas, that if you can achieve those two layers, you're a reasonably competent professional IT organisation. What COVID would call the private victory. That gives me my private victory. At that stage, I can stand up and I can go, actually, I'm pretty good at what I do. I might not be perfect, but I'm pretty good at what I do. And I'm worthy of doing business with. And what I discovered through my warehouse journeys is that once you get to do that and people start to see that you've done that, you start to have fundamentally different conversations with people. People start to invite you to conversations that you've never been invited to before. Because they start to go, actually, you're doing a pretty good job of what you're doing. I'm having a few issues. Can you come along and talk to us? And when you start to open up conversations like that, you can start to talk about enabling the business. I now have a good solid platform of systems which are operating effectively and efficiently. And now what I want you to do is work with me because I trust you, because you've proven your competence, to partner with me to help enable my business and make that happen. Now I'm starting to have influence and strategy products. I'm starting to have conversations that start to drive strategic decisions that help things get done and want things done. Two fundamental levers that we probably all know about in terms of enablement, the two things basically that IT delivers to the business. Process efficiency, efficiency of operations through automation. How can we do things smarter, faster, quicker? Better decision making by giving the right information to the right people at the right time, because actually we are the custodians of most of the corporate information. And as an enablement point of view, if you can do those two things, then you're on a bit of a winner from an IT perspective. And you're really starting to drive significant change around their existing business model. And what one of the characteristics of this field with my hierarchy is this is about enabling the current way of doing business, not only the current way of doing business for an organisation. Business enablement, drive process efficiency, get the right information into the right people's hands, make great decisions on behalf of the organisation. If you do that, you can help the organisation in partnership optimise their business model. The final layer, which I call competitive differentiation, I think the title's a bit misleading, but I've always left it with you. Really, it's about business model innovation. The reason it's a bit misleading is because, based on my experience at the warehouse and what I've seen around the place over time, actually, if you can honestly say you've got the first two layers in place about being professionally competent, you are totally differentiated from most of the rest of the competition. You really are, because very few of us have got that done. So back to competitive differentiation. It's really about business model innovation. So having proven that you are relevant around the current business model and helping the organisation get its current business model working, when they start to entertain discussions with you about how do I innovate my business model and take that forward, you can start to have that discussion. Now, let me be perfectly honest with you, I never got to that within the warehouse. And I could give you a whole other presentation on why it's incredibly difficult for existing organisations to do that. But if you want to know, what I recommend is you go read the work of Clayton Christensen and his work around disruptive innovation. Because actually business model innovation ultimately is about introducing, I think, disruptive innovation to your organisation. And what Christensen tells us is very few organisations do that successfully. I'd go so far as to say so few do that successfully that they write a Harvard Business Review case notes. That's how rare it is.
Disruptive organisations.
Disruptive innovation. Yeah. So, one example which I think you can talk about, which we all think is a wonderful case study, and even then I don't think it's a great example, is Apple. Apple's a large organisation, and they created iTunes and an iPod, and ultimately the iPhone and the iPad, and completely disrupted the music market, the phone market, blah, 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 blah. Great example of disruptive innovation. Only one problem, they're an IT company disrupting the music market, so they're not really an incumbent, are they? But it is a great example of disruptive innovation, albeit it's someone else's marketplace. By the way, that's a great way to do disruptive. I reckon it's a great way to do disruptive innovation if you can eat someone else's lunch. Amazon is another great example, but they didn't do it as an incumbent, they did it as a startup. Yeah, and that's actually where most disruptive innovation comes from startups. Yeah. But it is a great example of that. And now, actually, corporately we talk about, business model innovation. If I was pushed, I would claim a lot of the work that I did at the warehouse, that I take in the warehouse online has been disruptive innovation. But it certainly wasn't new and unique. We didn't think the idea of ourselves, did we? But it was business model innovation for us, actually, because it was substantially changing the way in which we did business. Albeit someone else had picked it up and done. So is it really truly innovative, or is it about being competitive in the equal market? And actually, I reckon you have a really robust debate on that and not come to the conclusion. So that's the model. So when we were at the warehouse, and as we sort this out, and as I said, this wasn't a sequential journey. We didn't start this, sort this out, and then go on the journey. We kind of fumbled our way through it, to be honest. But that's what we started to do. And once we worked this out, and I do say we, because my lead team helped a lot in terms of thinking and getting it robust as we go through. That became our strategy. Right? And I spend a lot of time talking to people these days about strategy and what's a great strategy for your organisation and how you do it. Actually, that is my strategy. You want to know my strategy? I can tell it to you simply. My strategy is that currently my most basic outstanding need is that I don't have cost effectiveness within my organisation. My strategy is to fulfil that need and then move on to enable the business as my next point in my strategy. Purely and simply, that's what it is I'm going to do. Of course, that's not strategy. The strategy is really about the issues you want to make that happen. So, I think I've got my first plank though, and how do you create a world-class organisation? How do you drive the maturity of your organisation to be able to do that? The next part is, okay, well, how actually do you drive it? Great, so I know what my needs are. How actually do I drive that over time? And again, there was a whole bunch of things that cropped up to help me figure this out, and this was a very circular journey, as there's a circle on there. But there are two key pieces of thinking ultimately behind this. One is capital and Norton balance scorecard. Everyone heard of capital and Norton balance scorecard? So we won't go into too much detail on that, but it's about saying there's more to life than money. While you're doing it to create money, there's more to life than money. And you need to think about leading and lagging indicators around the balance scorecard. There was another piece of work that was done in the mid-1990s by a bunch of Harvard professors, led by a guy called Heskett. And they did a piece of work called the service profit chart. And they sat down and they said, in the early to mid-1990s, they basically said, we know an awful lot about product companies and how product companies make money. You make a really good widget, people love your widget. You manufacture it efficiently, you put a margin on, and thereby you make money. But actually, we don't know very much at all about how service companies make money. Don't know very much at all about how service companies make money. And actually, in the 1990s, that's a bit of a problem because virtually the whole American market is service-based. So they set about trying to answer the question, how do service companies make money and be successful in their marketplace? And they call it the service profit chart. And they're at a Harvard Business article, and if you're into reading these things, putting the service profit chain to work was kind of like a landmark article that they wrote in the Harvard Business Review in the mid-1990s. Bit of self-promotion, if you want to get a link, it's on my website, www.successfulcio.com. And you can get a link to that article as you can actually just get the launch and some of the other things which I'm talking about today. And they worked that, and they effectively said this, working backwards, right? So I'm going to work the arrow backwards. The service companies that are the most successful, and we can tell they're the most successful by the results that they produce over a long period of time, are those that have the highest level of customer advocacy in their marketplace. Not customer satisfaction. Satisfaction is not good enough. It's advocacy. So, what's an advocate? An advocate is someone who says, oh my God, I just went to the warehouse and I found this amazing product at a price you wouldn't believe. You need to go down and get one. Right, that's an advocate. Someone who's going to tell all their friends to go experience it because they have such an amazing service. Now, clearly, great outstanding experience that causes an advocate is different at a Smith & Co. than it is a warehouse, but understanding the model, it's about providing that amazing experience that calls an advocate. And I'll kind of give it the next step away. That's fantastic. How do you cause an advocate? Well, what they said was, we reckon that in a service company, and they made this really rash assumption, that the thing that causes advocates is outstanding customer service. Well, they did. It's a landmark article. Outstanding customer service causes customers to be advocates, because if what you're buying is a service, it's pretty obvious that customer service is going to be the thing that drives the line. It's common sense. We all could have worked that out, just like we could have all worked out basically what we need to do to run a marathon. We started doing it. They became famous. Outstanding customer service, that's what it creates. Fantastic. So what causes great customer service? Well, as it happens, highly engaged employees tend to provide outstanding customer service. Really? So you're telling me that someone who believes in the organisation and what it stands for, loves their job and what they do, are empowered to take action, will go the extra mile to provide outstanding customer service? Who would have thought? Oh, there's another benefit, by the way. Highly engaged employees tend to stay around longer, and therefore they can answer more complex customer queries and problems, which is a big factor in customer service as well. So then they said, okay, so how do you create highly engaged employees? And, well, actually, it's about how you design and run your organisation. There's a leadership and management component to that, but there's actually also an organisational design component to that. And in terms of the further research which has been done, I really like the research that was done by Booz and Company through work which they call organisational DNA, and what they said was, there are 4 key things you need to really think about because they're really, really important when you design your organisation to engage your employees, to provide superior customer service so that you have customer assets so you can actually grow and have superior results. And they are these 4 things. 1, make sure everyone knows what decisions they can make and who makes what decisions. Clarify decision rights. Make sure everyone understands who can make what decisions and when they can make them and how they make them. Oh, and by the way, put them as close to the point of customer service as you possibly can. Understanding that there are rules and there are, there's prudential issues that you need to worry about. I'm doing some work with the council at the moment, right? And within the council, there are rules about handling public money, and not only about how you handle it, but how you're seen to be handling it. Those things have to be adhered to as part of your organisational design. But put your decisions as close to the point of customer service as you can. Make sure everyone understands what decisions they can make and what decisions they can't, and who gets to make those decisions. Second one, another really difficult leap to make. Give them the information they need to make good decisions. So if you're going to empower someone to make a decision, make sure they've got the information they need to make great decisions. And actually be successful at their job. Number 3, provide alignment. So don't tell someone that they're responsible for these decisions and give them information to make those decisions, but then drive the performance review on something completely different. That would be kind of stupid. Don't set out an organisational strategy that says what we want to do is A, B, C, D, and then tell them they want to make decisions which is contrary to the organisational strategy of A, B, C, D. Right? You try and get as much clear sight alignment as you can from what I do today, what decisions I make, how I execute my job, to the organisational goals. And that's not an easy task to do, but that's the task we need to make happen. Number 4 is implement a sympathetic structure. So again, don't design your organisation and your structure in a way that has activities over here that impact decisions which are meant to be responsible for over there. Make sure you design holistically so that the structure supports the decisions you want to make and how you want to operate going forward. Now, what Booz said and we're very strong about is that we leaders in organisations, typically what we do is pull the structure and cha-ching. It's not working, I'm going to restructure. And we completely forget about those. It doesn't work, what do? We pull the structure lever, cha-ching. Damn it, didn't work. Well, perhaps it's because no one really understands what decisions they're responsible for. Changing the damn structure and their responsibilities so much. It was, that was a revelation for me. That was a revelation for me to stop restructuring. Unless we absolutely had to. And sometimes you do have to, because actually, as you go up through the hierarchy, it needs to be different needs. There's actually different organisation structures that sympathetic to what you need to manage your role at the time. So there are still reasons to restructure, good reasons to restructure, but it needs to be driven by that kind of approach. And that's what they said. So let's run that cycle forward. If you design your organisation in a way that makes it easy for your people to be successful at providing great customer service because you've designed it to put the decisions in the right place, give them the information they need, you've aligned all the incentives to make it happen, and you give them a structure that helps them be successful, then surprise, surprise, your employees are probably going to be engaged and they're going to believe in what you do as an organisation, and they're going to love doing the job because they can provide great customer service and they see really happy customers as a result of their effort. Really happy customers who go back and tell all of their friends about what it is they're doing and who commit to come back and buy, thereby you start to drive results going forward. I thought this was a stunning piece of research because I knew, right, and I'd figured out that when you're running an information services shop, there's a clue there that says perhaps we're a service-based business. And that actually that's what we are as a services-based business, and actually most of our businesses are. Even those businesses that think they're product businesses, there's huge service components to them. Apple sells an iPhone, but what about all the services that run behind it in terms of the phone, the iTunes, the App Store, they're all services based. The product's almost irrelevant compared to all the services that goes with it. Actually, that's not true. I love my iPhone, it's cool. the power of brand, that's a whole other discussion. So I figured out that if what I was going to do was climb the hierarchy of needs, what I needed to do was manage this dynamic of how I design my organisation to empower my people, to provide great customer service so that my customers will say great things about me. And that's how I'll be perceived as having value and being influential across my business over time. And eventually over time I started to realise that there were things to look for that made a real difference and there were things to look for that don't make a real difference. And the best way I can describe it, oddly enough, is another story. So I don't really tell these stories. And imagine yourself as an IT department suspended beautifully between two bungee cords. One bungee cord is pulling you that way towards your goal, world-class IS, right, that organisational maturity, world-class IS. One is pulling you back and stopping you from achieving that and is restraining you going forward. So there you are. Some forces pulling forward because everyone wants to be successful. Some things not quite happening for you in your organisation which are restraining you and pulling you back. Now how do you get from where you are to your goal? I reckon there are 2 or 3 ways you can do it. Hopefully you've all kind of worked out what the best way is. Right, the first way is start walking towards your goal. And as soon as you start walking towards your goal and you're suspended between two bungee cords, what's going to happen?
More resistance.
The restraining one's going to get stronger and start pulling you back. And worse yet, the one in front of you that's meant to be pulling you towards your goal is going to get slacker and not be as powerful and strong. And actually you're going to end up getting frustrated ultimately, and it's really hard work and you're going to end up drifting back to where you were. Because the relative power equilibrium says you're always going to end up back where you were if nothing changes. And you can walk backwards and forwards and you can drive it and actually you might get a little further, you might get a little further, but ultimately you end up back where you were. What you could do is you could replace the bungee in the front and put a much stronger bungee in there, and you could have motivational speeches and rallying calls and rack up the troops and put a much stronger bungee up there. And that might have some impact, right, because you've got a stronger bungee, so it's going to pull you forward. But eventually the one behind you is going to catch you. You might have a new equilibrium slightly further forward, but it's probably going to be temporary. And it's really, really hard work. So I guess you can figure the third way, right? Hack off the bungee behind you and the resistant forces. Because if you hack off the bungee behind you, the one in front of you is going to provide enough momentum for you to get to the goal. So what I started to realise is that if I'm going to start to drive this world-class organisation, what I needed to look for was things which were stopping this being put in place. And I needed to put in place a whole bunch of measures to try and help me figure out what things were going wrong, what things I needed to manage, that I could hack off. And yes, I worked my strength in it, but really what I was trying to do was hack off the things that were restraining me. It's stopping me from moving forward. You know, what are the processes? What are the processes that aren't working for us, that are taking us, that are going forward? You know, basic service levels. Here's one of the things my customers told me consistently, or told our team consistently when we were at the warehouse. What they told us was, your communication sucks. Because either you don't talk to us when there's a problem or an issue, or if you do talk to us, you talk to us in a language we don't understand. And after we got this feedback a few billion times, began to dawn on us that the actual level of customer service, or service quality, SLA measures. And I'm not saying they're irrelevant, but actually they were less important in our perceived value than our communication to customers. And I knew, because I've got the team to do some analysis on this, that if I busted my SLA and SLA took me 5 days to fix the problem, whereas it should have taken me 2 days. But I had very clear communication to my customers around what was happening, why it was happening, that it was going to be 5 days, and this was why, and we worked with them through that and communicated clearly. They were going to come back and go, thank you very much, the level of service you provided was great. Yeah, I would like it, but actually we were pretty good. If I fixed it in 2 days and didn't do my communication very well, I got slated and nothing wrong. And clearly there's a limit to that, right? Because if you never fix anything, that's going to be a problem. But actually, communication was a huge issue for us in terms of customer satisfaction and the willingness of our customers to engage with us. So we put huge amounts of efforts into changing the way we communicate. Here's one basic one that was a big fight, but I eventually got the team to do it, and I kind of did believe in it on this one, I have to say. I'm glad to say that I tried not to do that too much. That does happen sometimes. But here's what it was. We used to, and I think probably a lot of organisations do, we used to send out to people, thank you very much for logging your calls, for a standard service desk call. We have rated your incident as a P3, and the service level for a P3 is 3 business days or 2, whatever it is. And we'll fix it in that time. Our customers hate that.
What do you mean it's a P3? It's stopping me doing my job. It is the most important issue that I have. It's a P1, you've used it. And I hated it. Absolutely hated it. And of course, as long as it was within SLA, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it was, we didn't call because we had pushed this. So what do we need to talk to our customers? They didn't, and they hated it. And I eventually I got the team to change. And instead we sent an email out that said, thank you very much for your call, we've logged your call and we're going to be working on it. If we do not resolve it by the end of the day, we'll give you a call and an update as to what's happening with it and when we've resolved it. And my team says, no, you can't do that. Why can't I do that? Well, it's phone me, how are we possibly going to make all those calls? So we've got to update every customer every day once in a while. How am I possibly going to make all those calls? Now, by this stage, we're actually a pretty good shot, right? We have a pretty good service. Oh, by the way, if my team had breached the call, I said that's not as important as the communication, I still busted their chops for breaching the call. Because that actually is important as well. But they said, how am I possibly going to breach those calls? And it's like, well, let's look at the stats. Because actually, if you analyse that stats, 85% of their calls will resolve the same day. So you don't have to make those calls. Not only do you have to not make those calls, but you didn't have to piss them off by telling them it was going to take 3 days to fix. And communication was a big thing. I mean, as we started to slowly clean up our communication, customer satisfaction went through the roof, the conversations were invited to went through the roof. And team engagement as well. And that's what happens. This just kind of summarises all that rubbish which I've said, right? What are you trying to do? Actually, what you need to do is you need to design work, you need to design the organisation, and it's a bit of a bugger if you actually have to deliver services. Use your processes to deliver services. You need to lead manage your team, you need to manage your skills and capabilities. And if you design your organisation well, then hopefully that's going to create an engaged workforce. You need to understand what your service offering is in the marketplace, to your customers. You need to understand what the enhancements are you're going to do over time, typically all those things projects. And you need to monitor and manage your service perception, because actually ultimately service perception and the service plan is much more important than real service quality. Okay, there are tolerances. And then based on that, you deliver a series of results. Actually, from a monetary point of view and a balanced scorecard, they're about the costs that you incur, and they're about the benefits that you deliver through your projects and programs. And if you're not being very meticulous about measuring the benefits that you deliver through your projects, you're doing yourself a disservice, because that's a value today for the business. They don't care so much about how well you run the business once you run the business really well, because that's yesterday's news. What's news for people is what you're doing today. Really. If I was to think about that and put it in a broad balanced scorecard and metrics, which I think you should use to measure, it would come to look something like that. SLAs, make sure you have customer-oriented processes, not process-oriented processes. That's obviously not a measure, but make sure you have customer-oriented processes and you benchmark against them. Should be that opportunity. And put your authority to the side of it. So SLAs, we measured call reduction. One of the things we measured all the time was call reduction. How am I getting better? How am I getting better? How am I taking costs out of the system? It takes work out of my IT organisation. It takes work out of my business. People side, engagement to lead, and so on. So how do you create a mature employees organisation in any way better? By driving the service profit chain, or the IT value chain, as I've kind of read out, by driving the IT profit chain, you increase the balance scorecard to meet the needs of the organisation over time. By doing that, you can mature your organisation, become competent, and start to deliver value and have influence across the strategy of the business going forward. None of what I've said is particularly clever, so it's actually kind of common sense. By question to you is this: do you drive it every day? You know, understanding what it takes to run a marathon, it's not that complex either. You go out for a run every day, you do the stretches that you need to eat properly. And a lot of life's like that, right? A lot of life, actually, understanding what to do is really, really simple. The question is do you do it? And the do you do it is not necessarily easy. So I have a bit of a catchphrase, I don't want to article on it sometimes. Life is simple, it's not easy. Creating a world-class IS organisation, a mature IS organisation, is simple. I reckon I've laid out the plan for it. But it's not easy. You've got to do it every day. And you've got to be constantly looking for it every day. You've got to be constantly leading to it every day. But it's not simple. We just need to be professional and do it every day. Any questions?
Just one question about your experience at the warehouse. What one thing stands out in your mind in terms of a strategic contribution to the strategy of the organisation? I know that's a higher level, Maslow's hierarchy. I'm assuming the other levels 1 and 2 are probably done. You said you didn't get to 4. So what's the thing that stands out on the 3 for you?
In terms of executing that?
In terms of you as a CIO being able to impact the strategy of the warehouse?
Yep. Can I give you 2?
Sure.
I always try and do 2. I think the one, if I was to nominate one, it would be my own personal growth as a leader, actually. Right, because for me to realise these things and what it took to make it happen meant that I had to make a huge personal shift in the way that I led and managed my team. Because I can tell you when I arrived there, I didn't need to motivate my team and make it easy for them to do well. And as I started to understand this, and there were a few other things going on in my life at the time, and one in particular was some work which I was involved in with a charity called Step Up, which gave me some tremendous insights into myself as a leader. Understanding these things and getting some of those insights and changing who I was as a person and a leader is probably the most critical thing in us making that journey going forward. And that's not to say I'm the perfect leader now, because I'm far from it, but that was the critical part. The number 2 thing then is putting in the right team around me, both to complement my skills, but also who could make that transition start to do that going forward as well. Because actually it's about culture, it's not really about technology. The technology is all, don't get me wrong, but it's a second order thing, it's not the most important thing. That's kind of like saying running a world-class marathon in one shoe. Well, yeah, the actual shoes are important for some shoes which most people are, but it's not the most important. So I think, number 1, it's my own personal growth as a person. And also, part of that was about realising the differences between the consulting world and the corporate world, because leading in a consulting environment and a corporate environment very different. Very different. And just my own personal growth.
To put words in your mouth, would it be fair to say that when you're on private victory first?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the risk of getting a little bit too personal, I had to come to grips with the fact that despite what I was doing and how people saw me, I didn't actually see myself as a leader. I cringed from the fact that anyone would consider me a leader. I cringed from the fact that I thought anyone would possibly be prepared to follow me. I thought that was the most ridiculous thing that you ever hear. And that was a huge part of my private victory, was kind of getting over that imposter syndrome. And I mean, I still deal with it every day. It's not completely over, but I understand it a lot better, and you see the manager. So starting to get over those things is interesting. And, there I was coming from an environment where I was leading a 500-person outsourcing team for a global consulting practice, walking into one of the most prestigious CIO jobs in the country, and I didn't see myself as a leader. It's kind of stupid actually to think about it rationally. But you don't think about yourself rationally, really, do you? So yeah, I had to create that type of career too.
Glad you mentioned rational there, Owen. I apologise for this question, but many organisations these days, their IT is subject to the CFO, not the CIO. So, what's your view about how to encourage a CFO to think more like a CIO with regard to how IT can benefit a process?
I don't think you should, because whether you like it or not, money is the language of business. What I think you need to do is you need to be able to show your CFO this diagram and show them what you're doing to get yourself into the leaders quadrant. Because if you can show them that, I don't know a right-minded, rational CFO in the world who ain't going to back you to the hill. And if you can demonstrate to them that you can deliver that, then they'll back you to the hill. Then they'll back you to the hill. And you know, let me put you some numbers around that. When I first met the warehouse, and I saw this at an Australasian IT conference that I went to not long after I joined the warehouse, and I was sitting there not really thinking about what was going on, and this slide came up and he talked about it, and he goes, you know, there is no relationship between IT and value. That kind of made me sit up and think. And he went through a little spell, and the first thing I did when I went back was go, I wonder where I sit in that chart. And I've taken it off for this purposes. But I can tell you, our spending was industry average. Right? Our total spend was industry average. 84% of all cash we spent went on operations, 14%, that doesn't add, does it? It must have been 16%, or maybe it was 86, but roughly, went on projects. So one of the things that became very apparent to me at that stage was, I can't legitimately go back to my CFO and CEO and say you need to be spending more money on IT. You know, I really can't. Actually, we were probably spending about the right amount of money. Maybe a little bit too much, actually. We just weren't very good at what we did. By the way, I do come from an accounting background. I do have an accounting degree, and I am a member of the Society of Accountants. So I probably should have declared that up front. So I've had a fair bit of training through my time at Deloitte as well that wires me towards that finance view, right? But actually, it is the language of business. It is the language of business, and we need to be able to talk it. Technology isn't the language of business. You know, even in Microsoft, technology isn't the language of business. Money is. That's what they're in business for, right? To fulfill their vision and to make money. So I don't think. So what I think you need to do is demonstrate to your CFO that you're competent and that you're trustworthy, and then he will engage with you about enabling the business. That would be my advice. Any other questions?
I always think my experience is quite skewed, but if you look at your recall hierarchy of IS needs, how many realistically do you think have got above those 1 to 2 points in difference? How many countries do you think you should get out of?
Not very many. Not very many. And that's why we have such a bad reputation in our businesses. And that's why we don't have influence in our businesses. And that's why I think there's a really lucrative market for me to go out and show people how to do it as a consultant.
So the second question to that is, how many IS teams actually think they are above theirs?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. I guess people don't call me if they think we're above the line.
So did you have, there's a couple of, there's probably a number of frameworks about IT maturity. The name of the one that Microsoft uses escapes me at the moment, but did you refer to any of those? I mean,
do they call it the Microsoft operating framework?
There's the Mock one, there's the Gartner one as well.
So I don't know too much about Moff. Ask Paolo, he'll be able to tell you. If you look at because we've had lots of conversations about it over time. If you look at the Gartner one, right? Gartner talk about run the business, grow the business, transform the business. Yeah. And it really annoyed me when they came out with that, because it was about 2 years after I had to do all of my own thinking, the bastards. Actually, that's run the business. Basically, that's run the business. Basically, that's grow the business. Basically, that's transform the business. It's not a perfect match, because in their grow the business, they tend to only focus on revenue generating projects. But it's a pretty good match, actually. I'm not sure about the Moff one. I don't know, Paolo, if you have a view on that.
They all end up pointing to the same way, which is a version of the hierarchy of needs or the Gartner one.
Yeah, you look
Moff ensures the operational side more than anything else, but there's a maturity model that matches to the government, that matches to that as well.
If you look at CMM as a framework as well, and that's kind of a project-y framework. They kind of do my processes established, my processes reliable, it's reviewed ongoingly for efficiency, it's optimised end-to-end, it's actually very similar to that they used to lots of years. And I do have a generic process maturity model which I use. Well, not maturity model, hierarchy of needs, not everything, because I like the whole dominates my thinking until it's satisfied, and then move on concept that underpins a hierarchy of needs rather than a maturity model. But I have a generic process model which I've borrowed a little bit from the CMM terms to go actually, most processes go through that type of matrix, but it's slightly modified to kind of pick up the hierarchy aspects of it. You know, around established, around is it effective and efficient, around is it optimised.
When's your next marathon?
A long time away. More likely to get back on the bike actually. The analogy should be, I've used that how to get a fat man to run a marathon analogy lots and lots. What it probably should be, because it's more realistic for me, is how do you get a fat man to do a 100k bike ride if you rode along Telco, which I did a few years ago. Raised some money for Step Up, which is a charity I talked about. Yeah.
How do you see project management maturity fitting into that? And do you think that a lot of organisations ignore project management maturity as kind of real organisational maturity?
So I think generically project management maturity goes to a similar process, right? You have to be able to deliver your projects reliably. You have to be able to deliver them cost effectively, be easy to do business with. That starts to talk to some of the agility and time to market issues that you need. You then need to be able to optimise that project management maturity, to be able to team with the business, to be doing the right projects at the right time and optimise the end-to-end process rather than just, am I delivering a project well, but am I delivering the right projects, which starts to talk to some of your portfolio management issues. So I think generically it follows the same structure. Probably, you know, if you were to ask me to go do a hierarchy of needs for projects, it wouldn't look exactly like that. I'd probably steal liberally from CMM and give you a CMM style one that there's hierarchy. So, do most organisations forget about project management maturity? I'm going to say no, because to forget first you have to know. Yeah, no, I don't think it's a big thing. Having said that, I've become increasingly convinced over time. You know, as a consultant, I was steeped in best practices, also steeped in some of the largest goddamn project you possibly could. I'm not into large projects anymore. I'm into small, quick projects as much as you possibly can. I'm not necessarily an agile methodology guy, but I'm into relatively small, well-contained, quick projects over time. And I'd rather deliver 4 projects in a year and do it in 4 phases than one big project. Because one of the things that again became really real to me when I became a CIO is that, because we did kind of the classic waterfall big project stuff when I arrived, and some projects, by the way, you have to do that because there is no way to break them up. But what I've found is that if you break it down and you do these projects, what you do is you go on with an assumption that the user understands what it is they need and can articulate for you the key requirements that they want. Which we dutifully write down on a big long list. Yeah? And go, here's the requirements, and we do a business case off it. That says, we're going to do, here's your business case, it's going to take 18 months to do and cost you $1 gazillion. And they go, oh man, I can't afford that much. Well, it has to be that much money because here's your great big huge list of requirements. Like, well, I didn't really want that one, but I know that if I don't put it in up front, I'm not going to get another chance and you're going to change control my ass out of business. Yeah, because we do, right? And so I have to give you this great big huge long list of requirements, but I can't afford that. And actually, if you make the mistake then of going back and going, oh, now tell me what the benefits are to justify this investment. Oh, I can't do that. And so you eventually get that and you get a business case that's got some kind of trade-off of what they may or may not want because they don't really understand where they are because, you know, fat man running a marathon, you don't really understand what's going on to be running a marathon and you're the fat guy because you just can't, you haven't got that line of sight. It's too big a gap. And it's the same in terms of delivering improved functionality over time for your business. And so you execute the project, you write your business case, and almost every business case you write, and I've signed heaps of these business cases off, you write it based upon the assumption that you get to go live, maybe do 4 or 5 or 6 weeks if you're really lucky, handover, perhaps do some initial training for the people, and then the world will be perfect. Because you don't have any more money to spend, because you spent it all doing this great big huge whopping project, delivering shit that the business didn't really know that they wanted. And I mean, we do that, right? That's our standard mode of operation.
So you've put strategic vision for obviously the IS organisation pretty high on that hierarchy of things. And if we all agree that very few organisations make it to the top of the triangle, then part of the issue with projects and the direction around projects is that it's very difficult to get them to be strategically aligned because the strategy is so far up the hierarchy of things.
Yeah, so that's not meant to depict that you're engaging in strategy. What that's showing, what that's meant to indicate is that when you're operating at the level of business model innovation, or competitive differentiation, business model innovation, you are truly a strategic driver of the business because you're fundamentally changing the way they operate.
So I guess where I'm coming from is more of an experience point of view where I've been involved in a couple of organisations, not the warehouse specifically. I was involved with the warehouse, and I'm not saying it's not the organisation. They do a lot of projects.
Stop doing that.
Yeah. Do a lot of projects, and some big projects that run around at the lower level trying to build benefits without really realising that they don't have strategic alignment.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know that did that. It has particularly good as well.
Oh, you were there.
Hopefully not by the time I was towards the end of my tenure. And you know, what that's meant to do is say, you know, the role of IS is about driving operations, about tactically improving the business, about strategically repositioning the business. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. Having said that, you're right. Often organisations, and there's a trap you fall into is, I need to understand what my requirements are and what it is my user needs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run around and ask them what it is they want to need. And I'm going to put that on a big list and I'm going to call it a portfolio. Now, I'm not saying don't run around and ask users what they need. Actually, you need to do that. But in my view, strategy execution is a little more complex than that, because you need to do that and you need to put that list. What you also then need to do is you need to come top down and go, where's the business going, what's important to us, what's our model and how are we moving, and what does that predict should be the major things that we're doing. And then you need to have a great query discussion to reconcile the two views and come up with a very program that we can use. And you know, if you've done it right, that's a pretty tough discussion because you've got to make some significant trade-offs. And please do make the trade-offs. You know, you have to make the trade-offs and you have to get focused. Don't try and do too much. You know, we had a BA team of, it bounced around in size, you know, for the sake of the discussion, about 10. You know, but we were doing 40 projects. Now, we were having issues since we weren't delivering projects in a timely fashion. I'm not Einstein. But that's kind of a day a week for a project on average, right? It's no wonder we're not delivering very much. Maybe if I did 5 projects, I could deliver a whole bunch of the stuff that we're going to do on those. And that's a pretty simple thing. It took us about 2 years to reposition ourselves to do that very easy. It takes time. You've got to hack away at the dynamics behind you that how you do that. Part of that hack away is having sometimes some tough discussions with the customers. This is actually, you know, you can't have this. I'm not saying no. What I'm saying is we've all agreed this is a high priority. Let's focus on that and get it done. Let's see. How much are you drinking? So, I think the answer is no, outsourcing doesn't necessarily lend itself to any particular level. What I would say is this: if what you're doing is struggling for reliability and cost effectiveness, the worst thing you can do is give it to someone else as an outsource arrangement. Right? There's a phrase for that, right? Your best for less. Yeah? And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You know, in the best possible circumstances, because I run an outsourcing organisation as well, in the best possible circumstances, it works okay for the outsourcer because they can bring costs out and pocket will change. But it really doesn't often work that way, because when you're outsourcing a mess, typically what you get back is a mess. And too often, and I think this is part of the root cause of that, too often, and part of the justification for outsourcing is focus. I'm going to outsource all my operations so that I can focus on the strategic things. Well, actually, if you outsource a mess, and what you get back from your outsourcer typically is a mess, because what you've done is not focus on the strategic things and forgot to manage your outsourcing. Yeah? Then what you're going to get back is a mess, and guess what? You're still going to get absolutely caned by the CFO and the CEO for not delivering effective IT services, because they still hold you responsible for it. So I would say I don't think outsourcing your mess is a really smart idea. You should in fact re-engineer what it is you're doing and get it right. Maybe not all the way out to the cost effectiveness, but a fair way out to the cost effectiveness, definitely reliable before you engage in outsourcing. The second thing I'd say is, don't do it for focus reasons. You know, because you have to manage your outsourcer just like you have to manage the person in the team who's having to lead it. And here's what I'd say is that if you put less effort into managing your outsourcer than you do for managing and leading money managers, you're undercooking the management of your outsourcing arrangement and the management of it. And that if it takes a lot longer to lead and manage your team member, it probably means you need to replace your team member and get someone who's decent at your job. And you'll get an outsourcer who's decent at your job if you've got to worry about it. So I would recommend the outsource method. When you start to get up into the cost effectiveness, I think there's a role for outsourcing to play when you start to have reliability, because potentially they can drive better efficiencies for you, particularly when you can't get scale. And if you can't get scale in something, outsourcing to someone who has scale is reasonably smart to do. What does scale look like? I mean, I think everyone has different views on that, but if you're talking about people, I reckon you need a team of a minimum of 5 before you can claim that scale. And a particular skill set. By the time you get operational coverage, by the time you spread knowledge across people to reduce risk. If you start to do much less than that in terms of a skill set, then I think outsourcing is a viable option for you. If you start to get more than that, actually my view is if you're really good at your job, you should be able to do it cheaper than an outsourcer. You should be able to do it cheaper than an outsourcer because you don't have to pay for account management, you don't have to pay for sales effort, you don't have to pay for their office premises. You don't have to pay for their margin. Actually, the is getting what you need is you have a 25% leeway because you have the same cost service. When I first joined the warehouse, I went on a study tour around the place, and one of the people I got to meet was a guy called Colin Cobain, who was the CIO of Tesco. I think he might be the second CEO. Who's kind of the second largest retailer in the UK and Europe's largest retailer. I'm talking about houses. And closure is pretty delivery guy. He said, when I talk about outsourcing, he said, do you outsource much? And he says, no, I don't outsource. Outsourcing just means that we carry your own competence.
Just like council
To carry your own competence. Oops. So, actually, I think if we're good at what we do, we don't need to outsource actually, is the bottom line, provided we can get scale. If you can't get scale, there are reasons to outsource. Specialist skills, I guess that's a scale issue, but there are reasons to bring specialist skills into it. Now, the question is, I guess that would make me not a fan of outsourcing.
But to hire a consultant to assist you on the way.
Oh, you definitely should hire a consultant. One of my big pitches, because I've been with the words for years and years and years, right? So one of the things I pitch often, for those of you who are in this game, listen hard. is I pitch strategy assignments, but I'm very clear I'm not going to do your strategy for you. Because if I do your strategy for you, it's going to sit on the shelf and be completely and utterly useless. And the last thing I want the shelf for, I don't want it to sit on the shelf and be completely and utterly useless. Because that doesn't have value for anyone. Besides that, actually doing the strategy is really bloody hard work. And I'd rather later that I can help them through the process and facilitate them through that process. And there's much more value in that, and they start to build skills. It doesn't cost them really as much, because I'm pretty expensive to do full-time on the street. And hopefully they'll actually use it as well. So that's kind of, as a consultant, that's kind of how I pitch. It's like, actually, it's not me. I'm not going to do anything for you apart from support and talk to you, share some of my knowledge, tell you that it's really quite simple after all, and you just have to execute it every day. I'll get into wind up. Any more questions? And getting the wind up. Any more questions? Well, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your questions. I've really enjoyed it. I do love standing up in front of people and talking about my ideas. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Rob. Lastly, do go to the Getting I.T website. There's a lot more resources there. There's a great checklist that we've now built with the help of Owen, with Noah, with a number of people. And it is there as a tool for you as the public to use to help improve things. We'll also have resources like these things from Owen seminars and more that again on the site, so go there and get it. If you weren't aware, this seminar has been videoed, so it will be up on YouTube in a couple of weeks, so watch out for that. And we're going to send out the seminar by email as well. Presentation, yeah.
Once I correct the spelling mistake on the front page, we'll get you the yes.
Shows you're human.
Only just though. So yeah, I mean, and very last thing, do support us, because we've got a huge opportunity here, and there is answers here. It's not like we're all going to what we do. There is answers here, so let's get on with it. Great New Zealand.
Rather than a specific project, I think what actually happens is that many projects that are said to succeed haven't really succeeded well. So there's a failure element in many projects. Now, if we wanted the classic failed project, we'd just look at the police project many years ago, but it was done with good intent. And I think the problem with many IT projects is that they don't actually succeed to the point of delivering the benefits that were seen at the start of the project, because they evolve over time and they are over-prescribed and they don't actually work out terribly well. Now, some do, some don't, but most, there's an element of failure embedded in most of them.
And I've seen some magnificent failures here in my time here in New Zealand, and I think in every way it comes down to inadequate management skills and maturity. So if we're looking at IT in New Zealand and how to improve it, it's really looking at that management layer.
Now, I think that fundamentally what we need to do is create world-class IES organisations and go along the path to mature our organisations so they're world-class. And a world-class IES organisation is one that understands and meets the needs of their organisation and understands the dynamic of the IT value chain and putting that in place in order to be able to create that world-class organisation.